Welcome to Forward with NACCE, Inspiring Entrepreneurial Action, a podcast that shares the stories of everyday entrepreneurs, entrepreneurial leaders, and the communities that support us. We hope that this diverse collection of stories brings you inspiration, inspires you to take action, and ignites entrepreneurship in your community as we make our way forward together.
Welcome to Forward with NACCE. We're excited to be heading into 2022. Although there are still challenges, there are many, many opportunities, and we have exciting ways of navigating through those challenges. In today's episode, we're going to meet two leaders from Phoenix, Arizona that are applying talents in really interesting ways through making. And that means a lot of different things to different people. So I am going to introduce you to our guests. Today we have Dr. Karen Sada, so we know her as Karen, and Dr. Bruce Balfour. And he also is the leader of the Phoenix Forge Makerspace. So I'm really happy to see both of you today. It's a great day. It's a little cloudy here in North Carolina, but it's sunny where you are, I'm sure. So Karen, let's start with you. Let's talk a little bit about your background. I understand you are an organizational psychologist, you have a corporate background, but you're doing really important work. So tell us about who you are, maybe some of the things that influence you and the work that you're doing out at Maricopa Community College District in Phoenix.
So I feel really lucky that I ended up in higher education and working specifically in community colleges with our students because it was never a purposeful thing. So I started out and I went to college and I didn't love school. I knew I needed to go, or that was my perspective, but I didn't love it. So I ended up with degrees in 3 different disciplines. And I kept meandering through things, trying to find something that I loved and that would make money. But when I first graduated with my bachelor's degree, I ended up, what could I do to make the most money possible? So I ended up a salesperson. Not because that was my dream, but because those jobs had the highest salaries out of college. So I became a salesperson, then sales, marketing, fundraising, management. And then I got an MBA because I thought I should, and I had tuition reimbursement. But I didn't love my work. And it took me until much later in life when I got sick in about 2006, and I ended up with BOOP, obliterating organizing pneumonia. And while I was working for a pharmaceutical company, I was in the hospital and they thought, if I lived, I might need a pacemaker. And while I was there, I thought, why do I keep doing this? Make money, have meaning in my life, make money, have meaning in my life. And so I decided to go back to school one more time and get a PhD in psychology. And so that led to a little more purposeful meandering. And while I was working on my dissertation, one of my friends said, hey, you should go teach a college class at the community college. And I said, hey, that sounds like fun. I'll try it. And then I finally found out where I was supposed to be and how all of that meandering through different disciplines and different jobs and roles and types of organizations led me to where my heart belongs. So now I get to work with students every day. And I get to work with, they're striving people, and it's naturally a diverse background where people come with different strengths and challenges. And we use our strengths to accomplish great things. It's all of us regular people working together. And whether we're working on a single student project or we're working on a big project to make the world a better place, it's always striving. And when I got to higher education, I will tell you, I had a little bit of a culture shock with what I will kindly call academic bureaucratic mindset. And so I sought out NACCE, the National Association for Community College Entrepreneurship, because I thought if there's hope for higher ed changing and learning and growing and allowing for more creativity and entrepreneurial thinking and behaviors, it's going to be a NACCE. And so now I get to work with students with Club Z and the Z model. I get to hang out with Bruce Balfour at the Makerspace at Phoenix Forge. I work for our district office on innovation and entrepreneurship, and all of it is fun, meaningful, creative work. So I just feel really lucky that I get.
Yeah, and I feel really lucky to have gotten to know you over the years. I was thinking about this morning. It's my 8th year working at NACCE and for NACCE and with people like you. And I think about the journey, and that quote always jumps into my head, not all who wander are lost. And really part of the journey is that exploration. And I've seen you do that with your students. A couple of years ago, pre-pandemic, I remember flying out to Phoenix for National Entrepreneurship Week, and you had organized this activity where you had invited presidents, chancellor, people in very high level positions, but they were welcomed into a room where students had like a painted canvas, and there were all these fun things for them to do, which really is going to relate to what we're going to talk about making today. So I want to turn to Bruce for a second, but I want to come back to you after that and hear more about Club Z, because I think people would find that very fascinating. So Bruce, thank you so much for being here. The last time I talked to you, I think we were actually in the Phoenix Forge, which is an amazing space. So I would love for you to share, as Karen did, a little bit about your background, what kind of led you to doing the work that you're doing now, and tell us a little bit about Phoenix Forge.
My own background really bounced around all over the place, which is not unusual because I think I'm primarily a writer, and I've written several novels and some other things, but you look at the back of a novel and you see what kind of careers people had in their little bio in the back for the author, and maybe that's what determined what I should do. Is like I should do a bunch of different things so my bio would look good. But I started out when, I was about 17, 18. I got a job as an intern for a relatively well-known fashion and commercial photographer. So I was, that's the kind of photography I was doing for a couple of years, and it was really interesting for a while. And then I gradually moved away from that into a variety of other things. But like I was a test driver for Subaru for a little while. I worked for NASA. After I got my, I had been working on a computer science degree at UC Santa Cruz. And I was, I think, 2 classes away from finishing it when I stopped working on my degree, because I had a full-time job as a result of the internship I got at NASA. So I got hired there and was a systems manager. So I was flying on high altitude research aircraft occasionally to intercept the space shuttle on reentry. And the rest of the time I was doing more computer science oriented things in the Space Sciences Division at NASA Ames Research Center. But that was my first exposure to sort of the big science environment and big equipment and big budgets, to do really unusual things. And I developed that interest in the sciences, and I liked being around that sort of environment. I eventually ended up working for other national laboratories like Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory in California and the San Francisco area, Sandia National Laboratories, which is based in New Mexico, but also has a big facility in Livermore, California. So when I was at Sandia, I had done a variety of things up to that point. I think I had my master's degree in community and economic development that I had gotten just while I was at Sandia. And I started advising the California governor's office, Governor Schwarzenegger, on the creation of the Innovation Hub program for the state of California. I think that was in 2008. And that evolved into a program where the person who was responsible for setting it up for the state went off to work for President Obama. So they kind of kicked the program out the door without money attached, because it took so long to get to access to funds, approval for large amounts of money. So they started taking proposals on what innovation hubs should look like. They picked 4 in the beginning, and we were competing with like Silicon Valley and Los Angeles and places like that. But we were one of the 4 that got picked in the beginning. And what I had proposed was basically a makerspace, which the term was very, very new at the time. It was, I think, 2006 or so when the term started getting used in Make Magazine. But it was a makerspace and a technology business incubator. So it was kind of a halfway house for technologies coming out of the labs, but also was accessible to the community. We had 6 city partners, 2 counties, and a variety of others, and then 2 UC campuses and a community college. Las Positas Community College was one of our partners. That did pretty well. It got a lot of attention. It was an unusual combination of things, and you still don't typically see incubators included with makerspaces. And we started a current one without an incubator, but we are starting an incubator program very soon. But it's just, I think with makerspaces, there's a culture where there's a lot of different interests, a lot of different skills, and all these people mixed together. It's a very creative environment. And so as a result, I think I fit into that space well because I have all these different experiences. And when I worked on my PhD at Penn State, what I was looking at was relational network analysis, makerspaces, arts incubators, and how they affected community development as well. So I'm a social scientist and I guess a network scientist as well. And so thinking in those terms of how you can use the culture of a makerspace to bring people together and come up with all this innovation and so on, it makes the environment a little different than what a lot of places think they're going to do when they start a makerspace.
What I was thinking about when you were sharing, what a rich experience. I didn't realize you were a novelist. I think I read that before in your bio, but what's interesting about what Karen shared and what you shared, Bruce, is sort of this very diverse environment. I remember for people who've never walked into a makerspace, to sort of paint a visual picture for you, you might have a sewing machine, you might have a recording studio, you might have a welding studio, you might have a place that has all of these different parts for people that may want to create something, quite frankly, that didn't exist before. They want to have a prototype. And as you were speaking and as Karen was speaking, I was struck by what NACCE tries to do is really focus on cross-disciplinary. Karen spoke about, the students and art and sort of the sense of belonging. You talk about, the people that come into the makerspace that want to create something else. And really, I think about the work that we're all trying to do with diversity, equity, inclusion, and ultimately belonging. I believe that maker spaces and the art of making is highly, highly inclusive, and it really does allow for everybody to bring their talents. Now, both of you are, I think lifelong learner is maybe understating the amount of degrees and things that you both have, but I think it's a wonderful lesson for students. Karen, getting back to you for a minute too about the Club Z students, I was so beyond impressed, even the trip to Phoenix, but you brought a delegation of students pre-pandemic out to Newport Beach, and we had some very high-level corporate funders. And what your students did, we put them up in the presidential suite. They took hundreds and hundreds of thank you letters that middle school students had written to this generous corporation that had started this VILS program and created this beautiful heart, which reminds me of a lot of the work that you do. So for our listeners, Karen, let's go back to you and tell us about Club Z, because that is something that you created under the banner of social entrepreneurship, which is something that you might want to define a little bit for people. So share with us a little bit about that and what's going on with Club Z these days during the pandemic.
Okay, so, with social entrepreneurship, and we define it in some different ways, but one of the easiest ways is entrepreneurship with social benefit, or entrepreneurship on behalf of others, entrepreneurship that leads to some qualitative benefit to the people that we care about. So I would say the tagline for Club Z is facilitating positive organizational change while delivering student success. And because I came from outside of higher education into higher education, I noticed the silos, and I noticed a lot of our good intentions weren't making it to student engagement. And I also noticed that we had some patterns, some well-intentioned habits and patterns that were getting in the way of us even making progress toward becoming who we want to be as organizations of higher learning. So Club Z was designed to immediately engage students, but also to engage employees and community members together, not in silos, but all of us together, student engagement, employee engagement, and community engagement all at the same time, to demonstrate maybe some new thinking and behaviors, some new patterns that would help us become more inclusive, more innovative, and more entrepreneurial. And in fact, it's kind of a sideline, but at Phoenix Forge, we're going to be MCLI, the Maricopa Center for Learning and Innovation. We're holding an event with students, employees, and community members called the Inclusive, Innovative, and Entrepreneurial Organization, being and supporting leaders of positive change. And the idea is if we can get all of us together at the same time, instead of us as faculty or us as administrators or those students, if we get us all together at the same time, it kind of takes down some of those barriers and we become humans together engaged in a creative process. Becky, what you created really fun and engaging and meaningful opportunities for students at the NACCE conference. And the students were so amazed because they felt like they were listened to and they felt important. And people were asking them for their opinions and what was important to them and why they were engaged in Club Z. And even that is a little bit of a paradigm shift because typically, and with good intentions maybe, we try to do things for students or we design things for students. And then sometimes we also want to be able to say that we were able to make this happen with students, but that's really more about us than it is about the students. So the Z model is designed to bring everyone together and to create really meaningful, engaging, and fun, maybe we'd say rigorous fun experiences, because it's really only through experiences that real learning and change can occur, the kind that leads to more inclusion, more innovation, more entrepreneurship.
That is so beautifully said. And I think fun is underrated. I mean, I know as an adult, you can see in my office, and for those who are listening, you can't see my office, but in back of me is a beautiful little painting that Karen did. And it's of all these people with bright colors kind of holding hands. And below that is a rendering from an artist that I love that looks like little scraps of things. And it reminds me of making, because what it says there is it takes until you're about 40 where you realize that these little scraps of magic are what really matter in life. And so to me, when I think about making and I think about the work that you all do, it's really taking materials that, they may not have much value because they're just laying around or they're laying on your desk. And then all of a sudden somebody will repurpose it and turn it into a beautiful piece of art. Bruce, I saw some of that at the Phoenix Forge when I was there, and maybe what you could talk about is some of the things that are there. Maybe try to paint a visual picture, because once you do that, I want to ask you both about if somebody's listening and either wants to find your makerspace or set one up, how might they do that? Because that's some of the topics that we're going to cover at the conference. But Bruce, first, if we go to you, just tell us a little bit about if somebody listening were to walk into your makerspace, what would they see? What would be some of the things that would capture their eye?
Lots of happy, creative people.
Yeah.
And considering that one of the functions I think of a big makerspace is to kind of replace what happened used to happen with some people in high school, where they had shop classes that they could attend and learn how to do some kind of fabrication with wood or metal. Those don't really exist anymore for the most part. So we do have a big metal shop and a big wood shop. They're very well equipped. And interestingly, we get a lot of people who are very experienced coming into those spaces. So we have members that are in the space in addition to our staff who are able to help people. Like, I've got a complicated furniture design problem, and our staff may not be able to answer that if they haven't, somebody that hasn't done furniture design or a lot of it, but we may have somebody who's a member who knows how to answer those questions. We have an electronics robotics area, textile area, which has gotten more interest than I thought in the beginning. There's a big shortage of industrial sewing people. And it often pays better than you think it does. So there's a vocational aspect to what we do. And there are companies that come through and say, we didn't know, they didn't know about us in the first place, but we didn't know that you also had industrial sewing equipment or quilt making equipment or those kinds of things. And can you train people for us? Because we have this problem that we can't find experienced people to do that anymore. And there's a huge demand for industrial sewing people in the Phoenix region. Same thing with screen printing, which started in Tempe, Arizona in the 1960s. So as a result, we have more screen printers in the Phoenix region than anywhere else in the country. And there are a lot of jobs doing that. And now they've reopened again, essentially, well, like a lot of other jobs, because they lost people during COVID or they went to other jobs or that sort of thing. We do prototyping, the 3D printers, the laser cutters, the vinyl cutters, those kinds of things, jewelry making, metal smithing, very experienced jewelry making instructor who's there all the time. And with our staff, one thing that's different with our makerspace is that if we have an area like jewelry making, we don't just teach a class and then there's really nobody around to help you all the time. We have somebody that is there in that jewelry making part of our makerspace who can just help you with whatever you need when you need it. And then she teaches the occasional short class like you do typically in makerspaces. So since we have all that expertise around, it makes it a little bit easier for people to come in new who need to get something done or they want to learn how to do a nice weld and they don't know anything about welding, but they want to do some metal sculpture that involves welding. So we can just, sort of meet that on-demand sort of skill requirement. And then this year, I was going to say in 2022, but now I realize this is 2022, that we're going to add a big glass blowing area, which seems to be a big demand for. There's very few glass blowing shops in Phoenix, and they're all pretty much at capacity. There are production artists that come in and rent a few hours at a time at a glass blowing place, and so nobody else can get in there, right? Because they don't have a lot of equipment. So glass blowing rental workbenches for either entrepreneurs or small businesses in the area that need a space downtown to do some kind of work and maybe have access to makerspace equipment at the same time. And when we do that, we want those people to engage with the community. So they either have to share expertise or equipment or teach a class or whatever. So they can't just come in, do their thing and leave and not talk to anybody else, because that's not our culture. And then we'll have a coffee shop in that bay as well. And the intent is to bring more people in from the community that might not know about the makerspace any other way. They come in for coffee and then they're looking through the window. What's all this cool stuff going on in here? It's all kinds of different things. Is it a business? Is it a college thing? What is it? And then we pull them in that way because they see it. And seeing it is a whole different thing from just hearing about it, of course.
Well, and they do what you were talking about initially. What do they see? You said smiling people. And I think especially now with how long the pandemic has been going on and some of the issues that have really come to the fore with people feeling disconnected, maker spaces could very well be that open opportunity. You don't have to have a PhD like the two of you have, but you might be really good with your hands, or you may not be good with your hands, but you're good thinking about things that could translate into a drawing. And I think that's one of the things that just the general public sometimes doesn't realize about community colleges, the open access, really their mission of serving the community. And the three of us have talked about that before. And it's interesting, even thinking about the comment about fun. We actually had a conversation earlier today. We were trying to hire someone to do a project, and his fees were just so beyond what community college or NACCE paid. And finally, he's like, well, you guys are fun and I love your mission. So let's just forget about the negotiation. I'll just do it for you for free. And, I thought that was really funny, but I think, light attracts light, right? And sometimes people may not be in a light space, but they encounter what you have to offer, and they can realize that by giving and sharing and bartering, and you don't have to have a lot, but everyone has a gift to give. That is really the spirit of what we want to convey to the entire country at the Makeshift 2022 conference, which is going to be April 20th through the 22nd in San Diego. So I know both of you are going to be there, and we're going to have other people there. So the way it's set up is it could be, Bruce, like the Phoenix Forge, where you're building out. I mean, you're really on fire, if you will. You're doing all kinds of creative things. But we also have a space for people that maybe aren't at that level yet. Maybe they have a room much like the one I'm sitting in that has a couple pieces of equipment, but they have big dreams. So they can learn from people like you. And I want to conclude our conversation with asking you, if somebody is say attending the conference, or they're listening to this, or they decide to Google making or find out who is Dale Doherty, what is this maker movement? What would be some things if a person in a community, they may not even be at a community college, wanted to get started to either, learn about making, maybe create a maker space, maybe how would somebody begin, even taking a small step in that direction? And maybe I'll start with Bruce and then go to you, Karen. Maybe one or two things that you might suggest for somebody that's piqued their curiosity, or they think maybe this could have a place in my organization or my community. So what do you think?
Well, so there's one thing to keep in mind is that their maker spaces should fit their communities. There are a lot of maker spaces, there are a lot of business incubators that get started and fail. And there's there's a kind of thinking around it's just a room with equipment in it, and then you open the door and people come in and use it, where it's not necessarily the case, right? And there are different kinds of maker spaces. There are hacker spaces, which are focused on electronics and those kinds of things. There are the large scale maker spaces, like we're actually like a large medium size, because we're 17,000 square feet now. We'll be 23,000 when the East Bay gets done. But there are a few in the country, 5, 6 of them, that some on the East Coast and 1 or 2 on the West Coast that are up around 65,000 square feet. And they get bigger because they relate to the community well. They engage with the community early on. They find out what the needs are, what the interests are. So if you decide you want to do a hackerspace and there's nobody around that wants to come in and do electronics, or then can you shift that into something else? Can you add onto your program to make it more of a built-out makerspace? But there are standard elements like 3D printers, laser cutters, those kinds of things that people typically buy, and they get used a lot in our space. They get used a lot in small spaces if they fit well with the community. And I've helped put together several maker spaces in small towns around the country, rural areas, and there they often have to be hybrid, so that they get funding from more than one program. So it might be a makerspace plus a food hub, or a commercial kitchen, or something like that. And if they're all under the same financial umbrella, then one can support the other when one isn't doing well, But tying them into the community is really the main point of what I'm trying to say. And and then kind of the second level of that is that it's not about the equipment or the building. It's about the people in the space and the engagement with the community and who you can bring in to make this sort of magical thing that becomes the makerspace that does well. So
that's beautiful. And it's such a perfect segue to Karen, because really what she was speaking about is Club Z and how creating that. So maybe we could even pivot a little bit. I think you touched on, if you want to create something, look at bird in hand assets, what's in front of you, what you can combine. So Karen, maybe we'll, with you, really go right to the heart of it, which is the people, is how might somebody create that culture where, people do feel included and feel welcome? So maybe a tip or 2 or 3 that you can think of for somebody that might be listening, thinking, I want to know more about how to do that.
Because the Z model, the Club Z piece that I think is most evident when you first have a Club Z experience is the sense of welcoming and belonging. And so if we were recruiting someone to start the first seed or the first moment of that type of experience, we might not need someone who's an expert in entrepreneurship. We might need someone who is really good at making people feel welcoming and welcome and create that sense of belonging. And then from there, you have design. For instance, with the Z model, it's integrated, sustainable, scalable program design. And so the program design adds on to the belonging with programmatic experiences. So and I'll tell you, one of the themes is one thing leads to another. We don't do one moment in time where, oh, we had the speaker, or, oh, we had the experience. Something always has to come next. And we need a variety of invitations that grab the hearts or the intrinsic motivation or the goals or aspirations of the people that we're trying to attract. And so, some of that information is on the NACCE website under the Center of Practice for Student Engagement, but I'm really excited to go to Makeshift and talk more about this stuff with the people who are doing the work, because we can know about entrepreneurship, we can think about it, but entrepreneurship is an action word. We have to do it. And the belonging would be the first thing that we have to do if we're trying to bring people together.
And just listening to you talk, I'm thinking about this bold initiative that NACCE has on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and just thinking about how the Club Z model and making could really fuel that moving forward. And that's just from this short conversation that we're having. One other last thing I thought that I love that you do, Karen, is this popcorn thing, which is fun. So people are popping up and making comments and things like that. I've seen other people do variations with improv, which is really fun. And there's some basic rules. We don't embarrass people, we don't put people on the spot, but we build on each other and we're uplifting each other. So I want to thank both of you. I can't wait to see you in person. I've missed, being with you. And I just hope that people who listen to this get inspired by the work that you do. I know it inspires me and it inspires our network. So we will see you in San Diego. If people want to learn more, they can go to NACCE.com and learn more about NACCE and the website and how to get in touch with Dr. Karen Sada, who also could connect to Dr. Bruce Balfour. So thank you both so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope that you will continue to explore the many ways to define entrepreneurship with NACCE as we celebrate opportunity, failing forward, and success, learning from one another along the way. Subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform and follow at NACCE on social media and learn more about us at nacce.com/podcast. Stay tuned for a new episode each week. We look forward to making our way forward together with you. Have you heard about our latest book, Impact Ed: How Community College Entrepreneurship Creates Equity and Prosperity? This is our roadmap for building back better in 50 states and globally. In each chapter, we share the inspiring stories of everyday entrepreneurs and explain how community colleges play a crucial role in their success. Visit us at nacce.com/impacted to order your copy now and join us in this work.
Are you curious about what's coming up next in the NACCE community? Join us on the second Wednesday of every month at 12 p.m. Eastern to set yourself up to be productive and impactful with NACCE by your side. We'll share about events, ways to get involved, and we'll have an open conversation featuring questions you're asking or problems you're facing. So join us on the second Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern for Up Next with NACCE. More information at nacce.com/upnext.